Hello everyone, welcome back to another interesting English literature lesson. I hope by now you have the GCE O-Level anthology with you. Today I'll be selecting and discussing a poem in the poetry section. The poem that I'm going to discuss with you today is The Earthen Goblet by Harindranath Chattopadhyaya. Well, let's look at the background of the poet. If you look at the screen, you can see Harindranath Chattopadhyaya lived in Punjab and he wrote poems on nature and natural way of life. Well, now you can understand the Earthen Goblet written by Harindranath Chattopadhyaya was an Indian English poet, a dramatist, an actor and also a musician. Well, now please pay attention to the topic, the subject, the earthen goblet. What do you mean by the earthen goblet? What do you mean by earthen? Earthen is made of earth. Goblet. Goblet. Do you know what a goblet is? Let me show you. It's a drinking vessel. If you look at this, this is a clay drinking vessel. There are many shapes, right? Okay, well, can you read this word? A potter, very good. So what is the duty of a potter? What does a potter do? Can you look at the picture? They only know the art of creating clay pots using raw clay. A lump of clay is used to make into different shapes, maybe different vases, goblets. There are a lot of clay products. So, a potter knows the art of making clay pots. Well, let's look at this question. What do potters use to make clay pots and pans? Do you know that? Have you seen that? Yes, very good. The potter's wheel is used to make clay pots and pans. If you look at this picture very carefully, you can see the potter's wheel and there is a lump of clay on top of it. Yes, my dear learners, you are going to read the poem with me. The Earthen Goblet. Oh, silent goblet, red from head to heel. How did you feel when you were being twirled upon the potter's wheel? Before the potter gave you to the world. Look at that stanza again. Oh, silent goblet, red from head to heel, how did you feel when you were being twirled upon the potter's wheel before the potter gave you to the world? We'll look at the next stanza. I felt a conscious impulse in my clay to break away from the great potter's hand that burned so warm. Now, can you look at this second stanza? It's a reply. We'll be discussing in detail. The goblet speaks. I felt a conscious impulse in my clay to break away from the great potter's hand that burned so warm. Well, look at the next one. I felt vast feeling of sorrow to be cast into my present form. Before that fatal hour that saw me captive on the potter's wheel and cast into this crimson goblet sleep, I used to feel the fragrant friendship of a little flower whose root was in my bosom buried deep. The potter has drawn out the living breath of me and given me a form which is the death of me. My past, unshapely, natural state was best, with just one flower flaming through my breast. Harendranath Chattopadhyaya. That is what you read under the Earthen Goblet. Well, my dear students, now if you look at the first stanza, you can see there is a question. The poet is raising that question. O silent goblet, red from head to heel, top to bottom, red, right? Particular red color. And O refers to surprise or marvel. And this goblet is silent. Goblet does not talk. How did you feel when you were being twirled upon the potter's wheel before the potter gave you to the world? So, this is a conversation you can understand between the poet and the goblet. And the question you can see in the first stanza raised by the poet. And when you look at the second stanza, the first thing which is very clear is the goblet says, I felt a conscious impulse in my clay to break away from the great potter's hand that burned so warm. So, the goblet says, goblet was having a strong desire to get away. From where? From the great potter's hand that burned so warm. And here, the potter is mentioned as the great one, very great one. But at the same time, from a great person, this goblet wanted to evade, break away. He wanted to run away. The goblet has opened its mouth and is saying the goblet wanted to run away. Run away from where? From the potter's wheel. We look at the next one. And if you go through, if you look at this slide, you can see the goblet replies, I felt vast feeling of sorrow to be cast into my present form. Is he happy with his present form? Is he happy or sad? What do you think, children? What do you think? He says, I felt vast feeling of sorrow, very sad to be cast into my present form. Cast here is kind of a section, category. Now, this, a lump of clay, is being transformed into a goblet. And this goblet speaks, the first one, the goblet wanted to run away from the potter's wheel when it was transformed. And next, the goblet says, it felt a vast feeling of sorrow. It was not happy at all. Happy at all with what? Present form. I want to remind you, my dear learners, do not get carried away by the surface meaning. There is more depth of meaning embedded in these lines. If you logically relate all these incidents outside the world, you can nicely analyze this poem. Keeping those things, we'll go to the next stanza. You can see the next stanza says, before that fatal hour, fatal hour, the death hour, hour of death. Before that before that fatal hour, the hour of death, that saw me captive on the potter's wheel. So this goblet mentions that it became a captive. Captive is a prisoner and cast into this crimson goblet sleep. This goblet is not talking, not expressive, and it used to feel the fragrant friendship of a little flower. The goblet now recalls its past. You can see three things. First, it wanted to run away. Second one, feeling very sorry, felt very sad. Next, he is enjoying, recalling his past friendship with a little flower. Not very big flowers. It's not with anything else. It's a little flower. And this is further highlighted, the theme is highlighted. If you go through, where root was in my bosom, buried deep. Whose root was in my bosom, buried deep. You can see the flower, the root of the flower was in the bosom, that means heart, buried deep. That shows their spiritual or the contact, natural contact in a spiritual environment. When you mention the heart, that is something to do with the spiritual feelings, spiritual emotions, not on a business purpose. It's a pure thing. And if you look at the next stanza, you can clearly see the potter has drawn out the living breath of me. So here, the goblet laments over its present condition. It says, the potter has drawn out the living breath of me. It was living until what? A lump of clay which was brought to potter's wheel is lamenting and saying all what he underwent. And it says, and given me a form which is the death of me. So the goblet, silent goblet says, now it is the death of it. My past, unshapely, natural state was best. You know, what is this past natural state? It was a lump of clay. It did not have a specific shape. It was unshapely and it was natural. The condition was natural. But it says it was the best. And why it was best? The goblet speaks, with just one flower flaming through my breast. So it actually enjoys the company of a little flower which was shining or glowing through its breast. We will discuss more in detail with some activities. Right. My dear students, shall we do this activity which is really easy? You are going to join A and B. I'll repeat, I'll read for you. Under A you get 5 words, B you get another 5 words, you are going to match. First one, goblet. Second one, twirled. Third, conscious impulse. 4, captive. 5th, bosom. B, A, prisoner. Strong need. C, mechanically turned around. D, a drinking vessel. H, chest. Yes, my dear children, shall we check the answers? Very good. As I've told you, goblet refers to a drinking vessel. Hope you got it correct. Twirled, mechanically turned around. It's twirled is mechanically turned around, right? Okay. What do you mean by conscious impulse? Can you find the answer? strong need, a motivation to do something with awareness. You can interpret in any, using different words, but this is not the exact set of words that you are supposed to use. You can use some other similar words also. But according to this situation, conscious impulse can be referred to as a strong need. Captive. Very good. Prisoner. Bosom. Yes? Chest. Well, I hope you got everything correct. Shall we move on to the next slide? Right. If you look at this, there is another activity. With those activities, I want you to be more familiar with this poem. Select the most suitable lines in the poem to suit the pictures given below. If you look at this picture, can you find some relevant lines, suitable lines? Hope you can do it with me. By now, you can underline even those sentences and the lines in the poem. And I hope you have the anthology with you. Come on. Shall we check the answer? Yes, very good. Oh, silent goblet, red from head to heel. I think you can bear with this color. It's an orange color, but the poet had mentioned the red color. Right? And remember, I just need to mention this also apart from discussing these questions. Oh, silent goblet. This was the question raised by the poet. Oh, it's surprised. The poet is surprised and the goblet is silent. It does not reveal its expressions. And red from head to heel. This red color is something to do with maybe kind of a warning or kind of warmth, right? So, this is a mixture of things. The poet had used the word red. Well, if you look at this picture, again, I think you are familiar with this question, but please find the suitable, relevant line. Shall we check? Very good. If you have got this, I hope you would have found the correct lines. When you were being twirled upon the potter's wheel, you can see the potter's wheel, and it was mechanically turned round and round. When you were being twirled upon the potter's wheel. Children, please be familiar with these lines, and when you write your answer at the exam, please quote them and explain in detail according to the question. Well, if you look at this, what can you say? This picture. You are going to find the suitable lines. Yes. Good. You can say, my past unshapely natural state was best according to the picture. If you got it wrong, do not worry, because certain pictures cannot clearly convince what we are going to convey in the poem. The poet had conveyed his meanings without pictures, but I have brought some pictures for you to understand it better. At the exam, you don't get pictures, you are not going to look at the pictures, you are going to use words and explain in detail. Right. And you can see another line that you can use for this is, I felt a conscious impulse in my clay to break away. Now, my past unshapely natural state was best, a lump of clay can be used relevant for this. Or, I felt a conscious impulse in my clay to break away. That also could be used. Let's move on to the next slide. Next line. It is a continuation. I felt a conscious impulse in my clay to break away from the great potter's hand that burned so warm. You can see clearly my past unshapely natural state was best, and the next 4 lines also matches. I felt conscious impulse in my clay to break away from the great potter's hand that burned so warm. Well, now look at this picture. Can you find? Yes. Before that fatal lover that saw me captive on the potter's wheel. You get them on the 4th stanza. You can see the furnished one, completed goblet. So, that is the fatal hour, the death hour. You don't get a lump of clay anymore. So, it is the relevant phrase that you can use. Before that fatal hour that saw me captive on the potter's wheel. Why we use these pictures is for you to get a clear understanding and to be familiar with this poem. Right. I hope you can really find the relevant sentence that is also in the 4th stanza. The fragrant friendship of a little flower whose root was in my bosom buried deep. And can you find another one? In the 5th stanza you get, with just one flower flaming through my breast. Well, let's do another activity. What do the following words imply? These words and this meaning will be very useful for you to write your critical comments. When you analytically look at the poem, you will really make use of these phrases. Fragrant friendship. What do you mean by fragrant friendship? Fragrant friendship. Yeah, a friendship which is genuine, faithful, fair. Nowadays, you can say the friendships are not genuine. They are not faithful, not fair. This goblet recalls its past and talks about its raw clay, its previous state, and that without interference, without any transformation, the fragrant friendship it wanted to highlight. So, this fragrant friendship, again I want to help you to understand that is the genuine, faithful, fair, pure friendship. Look at the next set of words, little flower. When we mention little flower, you think there's something very little, small flower. Are you going to interpret that way in literature? My dear students, what is your answer for this? In literature, when you analyze, you will understand this little flower resembles insignificant things, delicate things, dainty, innocent, cute, pure, something related to insignificance, delicacy, daintiness, innocence. When you analyze, you will be able to relate all these things and comment on the poem. Come on. Another phrase, twirled upon the potter's wheel. Surface meaning, twirled upon the potter's wheel. You would have now written an answer. Is it merely just to be on a potter's wheel? How can you explain that? The twirled upon the potter's wheel refers to undergoing a painful experience. The poet has not mentioned saying a lump of clay had to undergo a very pathetic situation or a very painful experience. No, not that. Twirled upon the potter's wheel. So that implies, that signifies, that highlights, denotes the meaning that it had undergone a painful experience. Discomfort, not a comfortable life. And it was a painful thing. and it was a mechanical process, something to do with mechanical process. It's not the natural process. Actually, twirled upon the potter's wheel signifies or highlights mechanical processes, not any natural process. Root was in my bosom. What do you mean by that? There, it implies the meaning fertility of the soil. Root was in my bosom, or natural productivity, ability to nurture. So again, you can understand root was in my bosom is not merely a set of words. It is to highlight the natural productivity, ability to nurture. My breast refers to the heart and relates to spirituality and emotions. Can you understand all this? The breast refers to the heart and spirituality of emotions. Well, if you look at the structure of the poem, there are 5 stanzas. And you can understand it is a conversation, I told you, a conversation between the poet and the goblet. You can understand the conversation between poet and the goblet. And it is a dramatic conversation. It's not just a flat conversation. It's a dramatic conversation. That is another point that you should understand. We'll look at the techniques used by the poet. One technique we can refer to is symbolism. The symbols. You can see a lump of clay versus the earthen goblet. Lump of clay is a natural product. Earthen goblet is an artificial. It's an artificial product. And at the same time, symbols. The potter resembles the humans. You don't find it on the screen, but remember, the potter resembles the human, interference of humans. Maybe due to industrialization or due to some other development, right? So, these symbols resemble the natural state and the artificial state. What are the other techniques? Personification is another technique. In this poem, you find a personified goblet. The goblet speaks. Actually, children may be the consciousness of the poet. The real poet and his consciousness, maybe he's talking. But anyway, the goblet speaks. Goblet explains what things happen to it. Can you remember? The goblet says, the goblet wanted to first run away from that potter's wheel. It felt very sorry, feeling sad and nostalgic. Remembers its the friendship with the only flower. So those are things that we really use, and you can see the speaking goblet here, the goblet speaks here, it is personified. Another technique, a literary device used by the poet is metaphor. You can find metaphors here. You can see flower fluttering in my breast. The flower fluttering in my breast is not just merely when you look at a flower fluttering on someone's or in this breast. It is compared with the main concept and twirled upon the potter's wheel. It is mechanical process, the artificial process of things is being compared. So those are metaphors. And you can nicely see figurative language, conscious impulse in my clay. See how beautifully the words are being used. The diction is superb diction to convey the meaning to highlight the theme. Another important technique used by the writer is irony. The poet wishes to be clay. Now, ironically, the poet wishes to be clay. The natural state is better than the furnished or the finished product. So, that is also very ironical. If you think deeply, natural state is better than making something artificial. So, there is a deeper meaning. Ironically, you can get kind of an insight, knowledge about many things happening in the world. Well, let's discuss the themes. And actually, the poem deals with most of the themes related to life. In that anthology also you get this poem, the Earthen Goblet, under the life themes given under life. And it's clear by now we have discussed natural condition is destroyed. Now, if natural condition is destroyed, what can you say? How can you look at this situation? So, this theme helps us to think about in detail how natural condition is destroyed and how it affects the original states of something. Can you understand? I hope now sometimes we will be discussing when we discuss with some other context, some other situations. For instance, when a child comes to school, if a child is given certain kind of subjects, if all the children are given certain kind of subjects, certain types of subjects to learn, you can think, if they are in a limited frame subjects where they cannot expand their education, can you think about the status of the particular child? Now, here in this poem, natural condition is destroyed is a lump of clay is no more transformed. It is been transformed into a goblet. And you know clearly this goblet is not happy at all, because it's just a drinking vessel which is used for somebody. And other than that, it does not enjoy any fragrance or friendship or any beauty which is really enjoyed by the natural state. Another point that we can discuss under these themes can be shaping, artificial molding or strict educating. That's what I wanted to mention even earlier. Now, shaping or artificial molding. If molding is done on a natural background, even education, not on strict education. Education where children are given freedom to learn lot of facts to suit their interest, to suit their future perspectives, to suit their future ambitions. You can think, what happened to the goblet? What is happening to normally a lump of clay? Now, through this poem, we can relate such incidents also. Another theme that we can discuss is nature is suppressed or subverted. Why nature is suppressed? The potter represents humans, and actually the potter represents humans who are crazy over this modernization. Due to modernization, lot of things happen and that destroys the natural background or environment. So, when nature is surprised, you can realize what things can happen and how things can happen affecting their spiritual growth. Can you understand? Their emotions, their spiritual development is really challenged and affected when their natural state is being challenged or transformed. Another point that we can think of is lack of freedom and variety in uniform education. If you think about, these are not, actually this poem can be interpreted in different levels. But if you go through, there isn't hard and fast rule where you can interpret, but the rigid uniformity in education sometimes will be a factor and can destroy the creativity or innovative ideas in a child. Remember, we are not supposed to criticize any education system, but variety in uniform education, that means same type everybody is learning, sometimes will not be useful. The lack of freedom also, you know, Goblet doesn't have the freedom. Goblet is silent. Clay has the freedom. So through this poem, the poem has helped you to give kind of an idea, that poem gives you an insight to think about the freedom where you're guided in a proper way, not in a framed structure. If it is framed, if children become captives of a framed education system, the future jobs also will have an impact. The professionals also will stick to one particular field. So, creativity should be developed or helped to develop through the system of education, also can be discussed when we look at this poem in a serious way. Right. I need you to pay attention to another statement. If you look at this, look at the slide, the phrase silent goblet suggests that the changes took place in the process of the production. The phrase silent goblet suggests the changes took place in the process of the production. Give your ideas about the statement. Silent goblet. You can remember, and the process of the silent goblet. What do you think? By now, you can identify the answer. It's on the screen as well. And that suggests the goblet is not happy at all. The silent goblet suggests the changes took place in the process of the production. And it's not happy at all. How do you confirm your answer? First, the goblet says it wanted to run away. Second, it says it was feeling a vast sorrow. Third one, it refers to a nostalgic feeling, friendship with the one flower. Right. And you can further say it does not show any lively appearance. It's gloomy and sad. That's why it refers, you can see the fatal lover. And its rigidity, lost his energy and creativity. You can see the goblet speaks, the silent goblet says it's rigid in one particular shape and it lost his energy. How? Fatal hour. During that fatal hour, it was no more, the clay was no more. Well, now let's look at another question. What kind of process is described using the potter's wheel? Can you think of a possible answer? Very good, I think you can. Now, this kind of process here is on the potter's wheel is a very mechanical process. And how do you suggest that? How do you endorse that answer? The word twirl highlights this. So, this is not a natural process, it is a mechanical process, it is an artificial process. The word twirl highlights this. And you can see the element of force and pressure is also upon him, upon the goblet. On the potter's wheel, there was an element of force and pressure. Another point, the process has completely changed his natural quality. What qualities do you see in the past form of the goblet? Can you think some possible answers? Yes, just a ball of clay doesn't have shape or color, but happy with that simple natural state, natural self. And you can see genuine and strong relationship with a little flower that made him very happy. And you can see the capability to productive capability. This ball of clay can be capable of using as a different product, capability to generate. And this lump of clay is close to the natural things. Relationship with the natural world and its softness are things that we can discuss. Another point is the beauty, the fairness, empathy, all that we can discuss under that question. Now, look at this question. What are the symbolic representations of the former identity and the new identity of the goblet? Nature versus nurture. That could be the main thing. Nature and the artificial things, natural state and the artificial stuff. So, the past form of the goblet suggests the simple and natural existence of early man. This early man was so close to the nature. Can you understand? The past form of the goblet, which is very natural, is very simple and natural existence. That was close to nature. But another point you can highlight, genuine and strong relationship with others. The natural state was very good because you can refer to the contented life, lived a contented life. But sometimes you can analytically look at this. The process of education here, the modernization, has taken the living breath out of children with a sophisticated new look. Sometimes the new look or the new identity can be beautiful, but the particular person has turned away from the person's simple natural self. And at the same time, creativity and productivity are also lost in such human beings. Let's look at another question. When the ball of clay becomes a goblet, it becomes rigid, leaving all traces of flexibility. If you look at the question again, the ball of clay becomes a goblet and it becomes rigid, cannot have flexibility, leaves all the traces of flexibility. How can you justify this? How can you support that sentence? How can you discuss this sentence? Now, I must tell you, please do not be guided only what we discuss here. You can think analytically according to the context. Now, in the modern world also, children, we are unhappy to say sometimes, are directed to give up their flexibility and become rigid, very rigid role models. Does the poem indicate an implication of this idea? What do you think? Look at this question very carefully. Does the poem indicate an implication of this idea? If you get this type of a question, you may have positive facts or the negative facts. But if you can quote lines from the poem to support your answer, you better think. Shall we look at another question? This question deals with a different context. When the ball of clay is changed into the shape of goblet, it remains a goblet and cannot be changed into a different shape. But if it remains as a ball of clay, it has more potentiality to change into any shape. Does this idea signify the trends of the modern world? These questions are for you to think. You can think according to the poem and think logically about supportive facts. If you are going to support your answer, you have to quote lines from the, if you agree with it, you have to quote lines from the poem. If you do not agree, you have to give your comments, quoting particular phrases from the lines, phrases from the poem. Well, if you look at this question, how did the goblet see himself on the potter's wheel? It's a simple question we discussed. You know, the goblet saw himself as a prisoner and he realizes that his freedom is over and he is going to be restricted to a given frame and a structure. Let's discuss this question. What were the feelings of the goblet when he was turned into this new form? I've discussed, hope you can recall, he felt so sorrowful to change from his former self. He didn't want. He also had a very strong desire to get away from the potter's wheel. That you can remember. Yet he felt so helpless and disappointed over his inability of doing so. He could not, he became a captive. Well, another simple question, what was his past form and identity? His past form is a lump of clay, living closely with nature, with no shape or beauty. What difference do you see between his present form as a goblet and the past form? This is kind of very important. His past form, again I am telling you, natural and simple, a lump of clay. He also had a genuine and a strong relationship with a little flower. And the phrase, whose root was in my bosom, buried deep, shows the strong relationship he had maintained in the past. But his present form is very artificial. He has been given a shape and a color. He has a shape. He is colorful, but he does not have any access to a simple, natural life anymore. Can that goblet give life to a flower? No, he has lost his genuine relationships and his natural qualities. Everything is gone. So you can think, if there is a rigid frame due to some other pressure, what will happen to the original status? Those are things that you can think of. Well, if you look at this question, how does he think of his present form? He finds his present form as a living death. Don't we find people as living dead bodies? They are living, but merely living. They are not live. They don't have a heart, good heart. They don't help one another. They don't have any mutual understanding. Mechanically, like robots, they do the work. Maybe the present status, you can see the present form, appears to be very beautiful, very sophisticated, but humble life which is close to nature, and the happiness within oneself is lost. Even the pandemic that we undergo is a result of modernization. Maybe. Right. Well, look at this question. What are the feelings of the goblet when he thinks of his relationship with the little flower in the past? He is sad and nostalgic. You can see in this poem, the poet speaks to an earthen goblet. The speaker, the question is raised by the poet, and the goblet answers. And it asks what it felt about his creation on the potter's wheel. If you look at very carefully on the potter's wheel, what happened to the goblet is a pathetic condition. It's very pathetic to hear the goblet answering the question, saying that it was so cruel to be on the original, it's so cruel to be on the potter's wheel, and it's lamenting over its original ball of clay, is not satisfied at all as in this new shape. And it also, the goblet says, the closeness it had with nature and the friendship it enjoyed with the natural flower. That is a part and parcel of nature. And it repents about the unnatural shape it has been given by the potter. The goblet repents, worried over its transformation. And indirectly the poet focuses on the people who deal with nature challenging. If people challenge nature, the originality of this origin of form, originality, the form and the beauty and the spirituality will not be remaining. Right. And another fact is the poem deals with the implication as to how a person from a rural area, much attached to rural life, is made to undergo the change in modern society with no choice. This person was brought to city. Sometimes if we talk about a person who is brought to city and who is adapted to modern life, despite his disinterest, at the end can be a gentleman, but his attachment to the village can be very nostalgic. Right. And in the modern society, children are made to follow and adapt to new trends of education and encouraged to be certain role models. Again, I am asking you, question is living with you. You can write a good answer. Do you think the poem leads the reader to this concept? You can think and write a very good answer. Right. Another one, I want to emphasize this, when it was under the earth, the bowl of clay remained a bit of shapeless clay. It did not have a particular shape. But when it underwent the treatment of the potter, transformation, it became a beautiful, attractive work of art. Do you think this change is needed in the world? Question for you to think, a question for you to write a good answer. Another question I am going to give you, when the ball of clay is changed into the shape of goblet, it remains a goblet and cannot be changed into a different shape. But if it remains as a ball of clay, it has more potentiality to change into any shape. Does this idea signify the trends of the modern world. Please think about it. And the themes we should pay attention to, you can see shaping, artificial molding or strict educating, nature is suppressed or subverted, lack of freedom and variety in uniform in education, or natural condition is destroyed. All these themes can be elaborated according to the context, giving priority to the poem. Well, by now I think you have understood the Earthen Goblet written by Harindranath Chattopadhyay. If you have any doubt, please log on to channel NI on YouTube and please do your references. Until we meet again, take care, stay safe, goodbye.